Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Drill Down with Peter Schweitzer. As you may have guessed, I am not Peter Schweitzer. Unfortunately, one of the very real consequences of the government being shut down is Peter Schweitzer doesn't get paid by the federal government anymore. He's not here. No, that's not true. He's out sick, unfortunately, but in his place is an excellent person to be discussing things connected to the federal government shutdown. There's a lot of different aspects and ramifications of this. And, as we predicted some time ago, we said, look, we think this thing could last weeks. We had signals of this. J.D. Vance is using the phrase weeks. And we talked about how it seems like this aligned incentive. The Republicans are using the shutdown to try to get a handle on the vast overgrowth and corrupt nature of the federal government. And the Democrats like it because they think the Republicans look bad and they can show that they're fighting against the Republicans. So we told you a while ago that this thing could last for a while, and here we are. It is still lasting. How much longer it will last remains to be seen. But one thing that is true, one storyline, one narrative that has emerged is as a result of the federal government shutdown, the food assistance program, you used to know it as food stamps, it's now called SNAP, Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program, as administered by the Department of Agriculture, has been dark for, this coming month. And one person who's going to talk to us about what that means and what it means in terms of the negative sense, but what it might mean in terms of the positive sense, is a subject matter expert, Andrew McClenahan. He's on the board of directors of, and this is a real thing, the United Council on Welfare Fraud. They actually have a really cool logo. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. I'm not kidding. And Andy has spent his career investigating welfare fraud, including food assistance, SNAP fraud. He's been on this podcast previously, and I hate to tell you, Andy, but the last time we had you on, we did record YouTube numbers, and I think it's because of your blazer. The houndstooth does so well.
And the pocket square.
Andy, thank you for being here. Thank you for being back. I'm going to read you this headline on a Newsweek article, and it says, Republicans block full SNAP benefits from being paid out this month. That is the narrative that has come out of many corporate media, mainstream media outlets. What's your reaction when you see that headline?
Well, not just the Republicans, but specifically President Trump as well.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not true. It's actually as a result of the shutdown that the Republicans have tried to reopen it. And one of the reasons is because SNAP is not fully funded. They have an emergency contingency budget that is there for disasters, such as if a hurricane comes in or there's a record number of allotments that are spent during that month, and so it's sort of covering your overspent bank balance. And the legal guidance that they had internally was you can't use it if there's no funding available. It's there for the contingency overdraft protection. That was recently ruled by a judge that said, no, you need to go ahead and spend it.
Well, and so what we're seeing now is you're hearing the sob stories. By the way, the thumbnail on that Newsweek article is of an African-American family. So the suggestion is that the racist Republicans, racist Donald Trump, are keeping poor black people from eating. And we have lots of reasons to tell you why that's not true. But more importantly, I think what we're hearing is that the Republicans are using this. I'm not saying they're taking a page out of the old Obama playbook, never let a crisis go to waste. But Republicans, I think, are being smart. This Trump administration is being smart about using this as an opportunity to investigate a program that has not been particularly efficient, full of program integrity, or particularly well run. And that's something that Andy McClenahan knows about more than anybody. Listen to Brook Rollins yesterday talk about what she's found thus far and why they're using this shutdown as an opportunity to kind of look under the hood of the SNAP program in a way they haven't previously been able to do.
Day one of USDA, February 13th, is we sent letters to every governor in America being very clear that no illegal aliens can use SNAP. 0, 0, 0. We asked every state for the first time in history, and this was in February, to send us their data and let us, with DOJ and a war room, actually start going through this data to better understand how this explosion of SNAP benefits happened under Joe Biden. We have found thousands and thousands of illegal use of the EBT card. We have been moving people off of SNAP. We've got almost 700,000 people, I think, we've moved off just since the president took office. We've arrested about 118 people. So this has been ongoing. What this conversation has allowed is a national spotlight on a broken and corrupt program. We found one guy in 6 different states getting a benefit. We found about 5,000 people that are dead who are still getting benefits. Like, it is time to drastically reform this program so that we can make sure that those who are truly needy, truly vulnerable, are getting what they need, and the rest of the corruption goes away and we can serve the American taxpayer.
One guy in 6 different states getting food stamps, Andrew McClenahan. You know, they say that people on food stamps are lazy and they're not working. My guy's out there working. He's covering a lot of territory. He must be in like the Nevada, Colorado, Utah area where you can be in multiple states in a short amount of time. Your reaction to hearing Secretary Rollins discuss what they're now doing as sort of official Department of Agriculture policy and what they're trying to do with the food stamp program?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty telling when the Secretary of USDA calls it that this has shined a national spotlight on a broken and corrupt program. I mean, that's pretty telling. And I think that that because of the shutdown and because of the focus on the SNAP benefits, everybody's asking, wait, 42 million people? 42 million people on SNAP, on food assistance? I think that it has brought an appropriate focus of questions that are coming here. But let me just caveat one of those things. She's only talking about the states that have complied with sending their data. There's only 29 states that have done that.
And so that's an excellent point. So they've only received 29 states worth of data. 21 states have refused. And then she said on Twitter that actually 2 of the states have sued her to keep from having to turn over their data. You're saying that that's actually not true.
No, it's actually 25 states under the leadership of the governor and the attorney general of the state of California. A lawsuit was filed, 25 Democrat blue states that filed a lawsuit to prevent sending their state enrollment and usage data to the federal government for their oversight and accountability into the program, a federal program. So they're suing not to give that data to the government. It's 25 states.
So the feds are like, hey, here's some money, give it away. Oh, by the way, we'd like to see who you're giving it away to. And the states go, over my dead body.
Correct. So ask the question, why is it that they don't want to share that data?
Well, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, I want to put a little bit of meat on the bone to continue our food analogy. She talked about the explosion of the program under Joe Biden. What's she referring to?
So there was about a 40% increase in just the participation in the program.
40%. When we're already talking about a program that has grown historically, we saw a significant increase during the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. We'll put this graph up on the screen so you can see the growth of the program. And then it kind of levels off, and then Joe Biden comes in. Now it's 2 things happen. You have Joe Biden and also COVID, so more money is kind of coming out and going to people. But those 2 things, 40% increase in terms of the number of people participating in the program.
And let's not forget about the costs because of the increase in the Thrifty Food Plan, which was done under the Biden administration by political appointees who never went for confirmation.
And just say, so explain what that is. So number one, a bunch more people got on the program, but then they recalculated what they were going to give you under what this program is, the Thrifty Food Plan.
Correct.
And just briefly explain what that was.
It's getting and calculating the cost for getting generic foods, getting your supplemental nutritional food groups, and how much that costs. That is what is used to calculate the minimum and the maximum SNAP benefits per individual.
And that changed dramatically under the Biden administration as administered by somebody who was unelected. This is a program administrator. And the net cost to taxpayers was a $28 billion increase under Joe Biden, correct?
Correct. And so what you're hearing about in some of the narrative about the one big beautiful bill took a whole bunch of money away from SNAP. All it really did was said, no, you have to, you can't play with the numbers. You can't substitute generic foods for name brand organic foods and increase the pricing of these groceries to falsely increase it. I mean, when they went to maximum benefits under COVID to help everybody out, then they added the Thrifty Food Plan, and it was even more than the maximum benefits. is what you have seen right now.
And people wonder why inflation continues to be a little bit of an issue here in the country. So that's the program that the Trump administration, the second time around, inherited, and they're now trying to get a sense of, hey, how much money are we sending out? Who are we giving it to? And a bunch of states are saying, you can't look at our data. And you said, I wonder why states would want to do that. Why do you? I mean, you've been interfacing with the administration. You've seen some of this information. What do they know that why should these states be sort of embarrassed by what's happening under the program?
Well, I mean, you think because any accountability and oversight into the program is going to shine a light on it. And just this government shutdown has shined a light just on the total amount of benefits that are being issued on a monthly basis in terms of cost and also who's participating in it. And the fact that she mentioned that 700,000 people have been removed from the program, well, a lot of the conversation has been about non-citizens and illegal immigrants getting benefits. And the same people who are suing not to give their data have said, no, there's no illegal immigrants on benefits. And they're finding them even in the red states.
And this is a big deal. And Andy's actually the one who's been kind of talking about this for a long time. And it's a weird relationship Andy has and the people who investigate fraud have with the federal government, because the federal government, and this has been the policy for a while, has been to reward states with low error rates, right? They give out cash bonuses to states for efficient administration. But your experience has been that doesn't actually mean the administration is efficient. They don't actually have low error rates. They just lie about it.
Correct. 10 years ago, the Department of Justice investigated states for False Claims Act because they were fudging the numbers on their error rates and their fraud rates to artificially lower them for the public. And you heard this, fraud is less than 1% nonsense, right? And it resulted in states having, I think it was over a dozen states that had to pay back some of the state bonuses that they got for the low error rates, and they would get bonuses for adding people onto the program. So the more people that you added, the federal government would reward you. Well, the 2018 Farm Bill took that away because the states were fudging the numbers.
So when people kind of are kind of poor mouth in or saying, oh, this is a tragedy. Look, in no way are we suggesting that people don't rely on this program. They need this program. Food pantries are a thing. It is worth pointing out, for whatever it's worth, and we'll talk about other people who are excited about this program besides needy people. And we're talking about wealthy corporations. But, when the SNAP program was first introduced on a permanent basis as part of the Food Stamp Act in 1964, the obesity rate was 1/3 of what it is today. So many scholars would connect the dots between giving poor people access to food that might not be that good for them and the fact that we are a very obese country, relatively speaking, today. But that's a different podcast topic for a different day. So we've got this problem. We've got the fraud. The federal government has not been incentivized to really look into it. They've not incentivized the states to look into it. That's changing under the Trump administration. But those are sort of the atmospheric conditions that have helped create what we have now found. And what are some of the findings that Brook Rollins and the United States Department of Agriculture are finding as they take a look under the hood in some of these states?
Well, I think the One Big Beautiful Bill has forced them to do some of these things with their DOJ analysts looking at the data that they do have. And there's 4 things that the One Big Beautiful Bill did that address all of these topics that has led to them looking into those things. First and foremost, that it shifted the administrative responsibility back to the states. It's currently funded at 50-50, so the federal government pays for 50% of the state administering the program. It's going to go to 75-25 October 1 next year. Mm-hmm. And then in fiscal year 28, they're going to have to pay a share of those SNAP benefits based off of their error rate. For example, California's error rate is right at around 11% in the fiscal year 24. And if that holds true, they're going to be looking at about a $2.8 billion increase to the state taxpayers to fund this program just in California. So that's 2 of the things that it did. The other 2 things that reveal sort of the need for the federal government to have oversight over the state's administration of the federal program, because the One Big Beautiful Bill said you've got to go back to work. Those are work requirements that were instilled in 1996, bipartisan Perora bill, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, that says you've got to work 80 hours a month or look for a job or be trained for a job. And if you don't, you're off in 3 months.
Yeah, and that's been the law since 1996. But you were telling me that that has stopped being the case for some time.
Oh, the almost the entire country has received waivers to not implement that for the last 3 decades, which is kind of insane. So the One Big Beautiful Bill said, no, you're going back to what this program is supposed to be doing. You either look for work or you volunteer or you get trained, because the best food program and nutrition program is a job with a paycheck. Right. So it did that. And then the fourth thing, which was in 1996, signed by President Clinton, is that non-citizens that are not eligible for other programs, like illegals, cannot get benefits. And so that has not been enforced for the last 30 years.
Well, not according to Joe Biden. They say anybody who's suggesting that there's illegal immigrants or people who shouldn't be getting benefits, that's a lie. Although you just heard Brook Rollins say that they've already removed 700,000 people off of the rules who shouldn't be getting them, and that's just from 29 states with the data. Let's talk about how much money actually goes into these cards, because you found some stuff about these cards that are keeping balances. One of the ways that people commit food stamp fraud or SNAP fraud is you get a card and it's got a certain amount of value to it, and then you sell it for less than the value of what you can buy in terms of food, but you sell it for cash.
Sure.
And so it creates incentives for people to, number one, acquire as many cards as possible. Number two, to keep as high a balance on these cards as possible. And you've got some data about what we found is some of these high balance cards.
Well, in my experience, even when I was working with the state of Florida, is I've seen cards as much as $20,000 in this that is on an EBT card.
So how does that happen? Just as you've seen a food stamp card, an EBT card with a balance of $20,000. As in, you could go to a grocery store and buy $20,000 worth of food in one setting if you wanted to. How does that happen?
Well, I mean, if the states would share their data, you would find out and you would see that people are just kept on the program for years, and they keep rolling these balances up. And
whether they're using the card or not.
Now, they're supposed to get rid of it and expunge the benefits after 9 months.
Yeah.
But if all you go and do is buy a stick of gum once every 9 months, your balance in your card, even if you're no longer on SNAP, that card is still good.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that you'll find about that is that those high balances is not a one-off anomaly. It's happening across the country. In fact, the largest that I've heard about was from the state of Illinois, is right at around $60,000 on an EBT card. No, nobody's going hungry in that house, obviously.
Say that, hang on. You're saying that through your work, I mean, and this is like current day, you've heard of an EBT card that's got a balance of $60,000 on it now in the state of Illinois.
Correct.
So that's a program that's administered by J.B. Pritzker. So that seems quite egregious. That's an example of somebody at the state should have caught that, in your opinion.
Sure, and I think that's just shows that, I mean, what supplemental nutritious. So RFK and Secretary Rollins have been pushing the no junk food, and getting away from sugary foods. That's part of the MAHA initiative. And then the other thing that they've been trying to do is get back to that administrative. But I mean, like in Illinois, there's over that's obviously $60,000. It's not supposed to be a food IRA account,
right? A food IRA
for anybody. But
talk about a health savings account, yeah.
Right. But there's almost 10,000 people in the state of Illinois that have actively used their cards within the last month that have balances that are between $2,000 and $5,000 on an EBT card. Almost 10,000 people in the state of Illinois. Now, and that's my birth state.
Yeah.
And I was stunned to find out that there's over 50 of them that have a card that has more than 15,000 on it. And so when you heard
hang on, 50 different cards in the state of Illinois. What are you guys doing in Illinois? 50 cards, SNAP cards, supplemental nutrition cards, EBT cards have balances of over $15,000.
Correct.
And the feds are aware of this.
They are, only because of the transaction data that's hitting their system, and having to get it. But if the states, there's 25 states under the Northern District of California lawsuit, share their data, I think those numbers are going to get a lot worse. And if I don't see how the federal government can lose a data sharing mandate about a federal program with the states. But the whole reason why they're suing is to hide this information, and because they're concerned that the Trump administration is going to be finding and locating illegal immigrants in the program, which they also say don't exist.
Right. And the reason why they wouldn't want the feds to find those things is it makes those states look bad, and they can sort of prove a higher error rate than the states have been self-reporting, and that's also problematic.
It is.
Okay, so that seems like a significant. What else do you have from here's how bad the fraud is in the SNAP program. Here's what they don't want you to know.
Well, I mean, I think that is in itself is shocking enough.
Sure.
But even in the states that, and Secretary Rollins mentioned the 700,000 people that were being removed, but from their own calculations that DOJ has run is that there's probably been at least maybe $3 billion that has gone to people who don't exist. So in
the last year. Like historically,
I believe that's this current year.
Well,
correct.
I guess think of it this way, right? If the SNAP program, I mean, $3 billion is a lot of money, but if the SNAP program has a $100 billion plus budget and at an error rate of 3%, then 3% would be $3 billion.
Now, that is just for synthetic and identity fraud.
Oof.
We're not talking about the trafficking sale of benefits, and we're not talking about the eligibility fraud that exists.
And that's actually like so $3 billion worth of money has gone to people who don't exist. And so you sort of like, how is that possible? And that seems wrong, and it is wrong. But part of what we have done, and why I think this story is so interesting, is there's that piece of it. There's the, oh my gosh, like, of course fraud exists. I mean, fraud exists in every government-run program, and the error rates, as you're well aware, can run from 1% to 10%, and there's a lot of real, valid reasons for that. In terms, it's just a challenging program to administer. But there are also people who benefit from the fraud that exists, and it creates these weird incentives to kind of disincentivize you from really looking into it. And so that's one of my favorite aspects of this story. So if you kind of look at the SNAP-related lobbying activity by food sector, food retailers spent $53 million when the big farm bill was coming up in 2018. And you're like, well, okay, retailers, it kind of makes sense. But they're actually perversely incentivized to not push for more stringent requirements because a retailer doesn't care if a transaction is legitimate or not, right?
No, they don't. They're getting paid.
Yeah. And when you say they're getting paid, we mean they're getting paid handsomely. And there's one retailer, we're not picking on them, it's just a fact. Walmart's a very successful store. Walmart captures, do you know what percentage of all SNAP shopper spending, Andy McClenahan?
20%?
I want to be like Tucker Carlson. How can you talk about this? You don't know. You don't know what the population of Walmart is. It's 24%. Walmart captures 24% of all SNAP shopper spending. They were the first retailer to accept SNAP online in all 50 states in 2023. And so they're a very interested party in this SNAP freeze because according to Newsweek, Walmart, this is one retailer, would lose $2 billion if these benefits are withheld for the month of November. Now, we've previously talked about the MAHA. We've also talked about soda companies, right? You talk about obesity rate. And I mean, look, we all want food to go to people that need it. I think the soda thing is, less relevant. And actually, fun fact, since we did our last podcast on this topic, 12 different states have said you're not going to be able to use SNAP benefits to buy soda. Good. 11 of those are run by Republicans. Colorado, because they're kind of granola-y. They're liberal, but they're like healthy liberal, So that's one of the 12 states that have announced the ban. But SNAP households spend 10% of all food dollars on sugary drinks, right? $23 billion annually goes to what's categorized as sugary beverages or unhealthy foods. And the stat that just blows your mind. So 20 to 25% of U.S. revenues for Coke and Pepsi come from SNAP benefits. The previous podcast we did suggested that if they stopped allowing, just through the entire program, food stamp money to go to sodas, Coke's worldwide sales would go down 2.5%. I mean, so that's how much money these corporations make off of this program, which, to your point, is poorly administered.
And I'd add on to that, I mean, some of the lobbying expenses that you've seen even includes the vending machine organizations and groups right now, because who doesn't want to be able to put your food stamp card into a Pepsi machine or get a Snickers or a even better yet, a hot egg salad sandwich out of a vending machine?
Well, and the last thing to add to that on this topic is when you do that, and because the programs are now administered on these cards, and so for every transaction that you conduct via EBT card, who else makes money on that?
Oh, the EBT vendors do, but also so do the advertising companies that are advertising to SNAP benefits recipients.
So it's just worth pointing out that it didn't used to be this way, right? I mean, this is just a quick. So SNAP was first introduced as a pilot program in 1939 during the Great Depression. It was a temporary era thing. It ended in 1943, came back as a pilot in 1961, and then made permanent in 1964. But it's just like most government programs, it's grown, it's evolved, and it has not necessarily made the government healthier. It just isn't interesting. Like, they don't all have to be this way. A state of Massachusetts actually did a pilot program that for 7,500 households, and they basically, because like, look, man, like, we want to help people, but we want to kind of help them be healthy. So they offered a 30% rebate if you bought like fruits and vegetables and stuff. Mm-hmm. And actually they found that more people bought fruits and vegetables. But do you think that could happen at a federal level as part of the MAHA thing or no?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think you look at WIC, the Women, Infant, Children program, which also is going to run out of money in the middle of November because of the government shutdown, not because of the Republicans or because of President Trump, that has very specific shopping guidelines. You only can buy milk,
right,
cheese, bread. That's those basic things. They don't allow for these, non-MAHA type foods as well.
But it just shows you, right? You put a bunch of money in there, and then everybody kind of gets a little seat at the table, no pun intended, including the Walmarts, including the soda companies. And all of a sudden, it stops being about helping needy people get food. Lots of other constituents get fed. And unfortunately, just think about some of the stats. Like, the money keeps coming. There's little accountability. You said 50 cards with balances over $15,000 in the state of Illinois alone. Where do you think this is going as we sort of wrap up here? You hear the story about, we're keeping poor people from eating. There's lots of the legislative maneuvering, and Republicans would say, look, we're just trying to fund the government, and the Democrats are getting in the way of that, and they're now using poor people and people who need food as the latest pawn to try to force them to have a larger conversation. But where do you think this ends up? You've heard from Brook Rollins. You're talking to the Department of Agriculture people. You think they will eventually get all the state's data, and then what happens? Well,
I think that there's going to be some assignments and some possible financial consequences for some of these states and how they are administering the programs and intentionally expanding it to ineligible people. The Trump administration has already signaled that starting in 2026, we're going to see rules that will change. For example, right now, you can be a millionaire and be on SNAP because of broad-based categorical eligibility that doesn't even test assets.
I love it when you talk bureaucrat.
That's right. And so when you see the amount of people that are on it, why is it? And the amount of synthetic or identity fraud cases, why is it? It's because they're still using those 1964 LBJ guidelines when it was there. And interestingly enough, nobody died of starvation over the weekend. As far as I know, nobody has.
Well, and your point about like the balances that are relevant to that, right? Because briefly share like what the average benefits are, and then how much ends up being on a card at the end of the month.
Okay, so that's a great sort of way to frame the conversation. So the average person gets $187 per month.
Okay,
and that is the average. Now per household, it's around $350. Mm-hmm. The minimum that somebody can get is $23. The maximum is $292 per person. So a household of four gets almost $1,000 a month.
Yep.
In a study that was done during the Biden administration in 2022 actually found that the average card per household is carrying forward a balance of almost $200, $198.
And that tells you what?
That they're not going hungry.
Right.
They haven't spent their entire balances, and that there is still balances available for people to shop and to use during the shutdown.
Right. So remember that. That's really why we want to kind of talk about this today is who knows how much longer the shutdown will continue? Who knows how much longer these SNAP benefits will be frozen? But it's important to remember that this is, at the end of the day, this is a money story. And it's a money story. And the money does go to some needy families, but it goes to lots of other people, including people who shouldn't get this money through these fraudulent transactions that Andy has spent his career disclosing. It also goes to these corporations who continue to just be in favor of as much money being shoved out the door as possible, and they kind of don't care if the transaction is legitimate or not. It's an important story. It's one of our favorite ones to cover, and Andy McClenahan does as good a job as anybody of covering it. So, Andy, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming in today on short notice with Peter being out. And, I guess like with the pending you heard Brook Rollins say, we think we can get our hands wrapped around this. You think that we'll see significant changes to this program under the Trump administration? I
think they're going to continue to try to push this back to the basics, what they're supposed to do. It's supposed to be supplemental, get a job, nutritious, MAHA, and then they're going to address the lack of program integrity on identity and eligibility and loopholes that allow millionaires to be on benefits.
Last question. Do you think there's any chance, as some have suggested they should do, that they take everybody off of the program and make everybody reapply? And that's one step towards dramatically lowering the cost and improving program security and integrity overnight.
I don't think so, only because they tried to do that with Medicaid unwinding for after the pandemic health emergency ended.
Yeah.
And none of the states did it.
So they didn't do it before. They're probably not going to do it. Well, I was thinking, it's a lot of work. It
is a lot
if you're one of those guys that works in the program, man, I got to reapply everybody.
Oh, that would be terrible. That's right.
They're not going to do that. But it's a good thought. Andy McClenahan always has good thoughts, and so we appreciate his time today, and we appreciate your time. Hopefully you learned something. It's a weird topic. We're talking about food and money and EBT cards and fraud. But I do think that, you heard how much money is being wasted, how much fraud's existing on some of the cards based on the data they do have. And I think this is something the Trump administration is going to make a lot of hay with. And they're going to use to embarrass the J.B. Pritzkers and embarrass the Gavin Newsoms of the world and show how poorly run those programs are in those states. And when you see that, you can remember that, like other things, you heard it on the Drill Down first. Thank you so much for your time. Peter Schweitzer will be next week. In the meantime, thank you for liking and commenting on our posts, and we'll be back in your feed next week. Have a great week.